I'm Amy Zaley with the Jerusalem Connection Red Alert Report for Wednesday, September 30. How do we know what we don't know? Many of our followers and supporters here at the Jerusalem Connection Report are open to learning and are already aware of such issues as antisemitism, Arab-Israeli tensions and violence, the need to support the Jewish people worldwide, as well as the state of Israel as a Jewish homeland, and of course the need for Jesus' salvation, an invitation open to all of humanity. But do you know how many people in the United States don't even know basic history dating back 100 years or less? In our forums, we discuss history through the Bible, of course, through archeology and its findings and discoveries with Shelley Neese's insights. We discuss the insights of Judaism through valued Jewish scholarly input and teaching. We examine the roots of theological antisemitism, including the idea of replacement theology, and we discuss and explore modern manifestations of antisemitism, including the trifecta of 1, the secular radical left and humanism, 2, the alliance with the Islamic political and tier, and 3, the more familiar tendencies of present-day neo-Nazi groups in America and Europe. These are all topics that we don't really expect to explore too deeply in our public school upbringing and are likely not finding in our college-level history classes. However, World War II and the Holocaust are not only recent enough that we still have first-hand accounts of them, and recent enough that modern technologies such as photographs, film, audio recordings, 20th century record keeping, this era is too close to who we are today and too accessible. It seems like educational malpractice that Americans, through various educational avenues, public schools, community, state, and private colleges and university, and even access to things like the internet, the History Channel, and the Learning Channel, and PBS, all lead to a counterintuitive result that alarmingly show a far too large percent of our population is ignorant regarding the Holocaust. Several studies recently indicated some frightening results. The Tribune News Service reported recently that 1/10 of young adults surveyed by the Conference on Jewish Materials Claimed Against Germany believe that Jews caused the Holocaust, and another 10% may think the Holocaust didn't happen at all. That's 1 in 5 young adults, 20%, think the Holocaust did not happen, or if it did, it was somehow the victim's fault. How can anyone arrive at either of these two conclusions? According to Yahoo News, a survey found that 80% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 39 were ill-informed about the Holocaust. The insidious field of Holocaust denial is alive and well among university professors, which no matter how great the documentation of the Holocaust, they believe it's appropriate to present the history to their students as an alternative viewpoint in order to persuade or indoctrinate students to see an Arab-Israeli issue through their lens. This is demonstrable through actions such as university campuses over the last 2 decades having Israeli Apartheid Week. Various terrorists and openly anti-Semitic speakers are invited year after year to speak to college students. Campus organizations such as Students for Justice in Palestine are openly hostile to Israel to the point of generating false narratives, propagating lies, as well as overt, outright hostility to any person of either Jewish culture or religion or any Zionist support. In fact, the very word Zionist has been turned into a dirty word, a derogatory term. In addition to the academic world, largely liberal and leftist and aligning closely with my second trifecta member, that is the Islamist politicians, celebrities and pop culture all seem to sway American of any age from learning truth and critical thinking. Moreover, the lack of educators dedicated to counter this is sad. We have the issue of social media and its bent muddying the waters of clear thinking and proper accounting of history. Professor Zachary Baderman of Syracuse University has research focusing on Jewish culture that reports about young American adults not knowing anything about the Holocaust or having weird ideas about the Holocaust, and these are not surprising. Each passing decade, he said, puts more and more cognitive distance between the people of today and the historical past about which they only know through platforms like Hollywood movies and social media platforms, now TikTok. The Holocaust becomes more and more unreal, especially in a culture like ours that is untethered from reality. Educators can only do so much in this current context, he said. But what's our solution? For generations, Americans have trusted its public and private schools to provide sound and complete educations to our children, to produce young adults and eventually mature adults who end up as teachers, policymakers, business people, scientists, doctors, parents, aunts, and uncles, all of who are equipped with enough knowledge to develop some sound wisdom and make society better, not worse. I implore all of you to engage in prayer regularly for America's schools and universities and culture, that our teachers will be academically objective and exercise intellectual honesty. Keeping the history of the Holocaust only within Jewish communities and the Christian communities, perhaps through their schools, is just too small a portion of our population to make any significant difference. Our secular American schools and colleges and universities and our social media platforms must be dedicated to truth and critical thinking. If corporations and schools can endorse particular political movements such as Black Lives Matter or curriculum lenses such as colonialism or gender studies, it can certainly embrace and endorse sound teaching of all history, particularly the history that brought the 20th century to its knees and the ramifications of which we still feel less than 100 years later, when we have survivors who can personally tell us the story. Shavua Tov. Have a great week.